I told you to clean that spot. Move! Do it properly, or you won't stop until dawn.
The notification came in at exactly 11:47 in the morning, and Adiz did not look up from her phone to acknowledge it. It was the delivery alert for the third package she had ordered that week, a pair of Italian sandals she had seen on the Instagram page of a woman she did not even like. She clicked the confirmation, tossed the phone beside her on the bed, and stretched both arms above her head like someone who had earned a long rest. She had not earned anything. She had not done anything. It was barely noon and she was still in the silk robe Emeka had bought her from London, lying across sheets that a housekeeper had changed just that morning, in a bedroom that sat inside a mansion that was not hers. But she had stopped thinking about things like that a long time ago. The Lekki house was everything a woman like Adiz believed she deserved. 5 bedrooms, a chef's kitchen she had never cooked in, a sitting room with floor-to-ceiling glass that caught the Lagos skyline at every hour of the day, and a compound so wide and well-kept that the neighbors called it the estate within the estate. Emeka Obi had built it 3 years before they met, back when his name was already moving through boardrooms and investment circles like something with weight. He was not flashy about his money. That was the thing Adiz had never quite understood about him. He had all of this and he wore plain shirts. He drove himself sometimes. He called his driver by his first name and asked after his children. Adiz found that embarrassing. Rich men should act rich, she told her friends. Otherwise, what was the point? She reached for her phone again and opened her conversation with Emeka. His last message had come in the night before, a photo of rain outside his London hotel window, a single line beneath it, missing home. Missing you. She stared at it for a moment, then typed back. Come back soon, baby. I'm so lonely here. She added a kissing emoji and set the phone down. She was not lonely. Her friend Chisholm had been over the day before and they had eaten the food the previous housekeeper had prepared before she was fired, watched a movie, and finished 2 bottles of wine that Emeka kept for guests. Adiz had not replaced the bottles. She had not thought to. She was pulling up a new shopping page when her phone rang. It was Emeka. She softened her voice before she answered. It was a reflex by now, the way a person adjusts their posture when someone important enters the room. Baby, she said warmly. Ada. His voice was clear despite the distance. Did you see my message this morning? Of course. I've been thinking about you all day. She heard him exhale, pleased. Then he said, I wanted to let you know, I gave my mother your number. She's been asking about you and I thought it would be good for the 2 of you to talk before I get back. She's a very warm woman. I think you'll love her. Adiz kept her voice smooth. That's so sweet. Of course. She might want to visit, Emeka added. She mentioned coming to Lagos to see the house. Absolutely. She's welcome anytime. They talked for a few more minutes. Nothing important, the comfortable back and forth of 2 people performing closeness across a long distance. When she hung up, Adiz sat very still for a moment. Then she rolled her eyes, stood up, and walked to the window. A mother visit. She had known this was coming. Every man's mother was a problem to be managed, and she had managed harder things than a woman from the village who would probably smell of camphor and want to rearrange her kitchen. She was not worried. She was an expert at performing exactly what people wanted to see. The call came that same evening. The number was unfamiliar. An Anambra code. Adiz stared at it for 2 full rings before answering. Hello. The voice on the other end was quiet. Measured. Not the frail, eager voice Adiz had been expecting. Yes. Who is this? This is Chidinma. Emeka's mother. He gave me your number. Adiz shifted on the sofa. Oh. Hello, Ma. She made her voice warm but kept it light, the tone she used for people she was tolerating. Emeka mentioned you might call. Yes. A pause. I wanted to introduce myself. And to say I would like to visit soon. To see the house. To see you. Of course, Adiz said smoothly. You're very welcome. But honestly, Ma, I think it might be better to wait until Emeka is back. You know how these things are. It would be nicer if we all met together properly. A full family meeting. Emeka would love that. Another pause. Longer this time. I see, the woman said. Besides, Adiz continued, I've been so busy lately. Running the house, managing everything while he's away. It's a lot, you understand. Of course, the woman said. I understand completely. They exchanged a few more polite sentences and then Adiz ended the call. She tossed the phone onto the cushion beside her and reached for the remote control. That was handled. Simple enough. Old women from the village were always easier to manage than they looked. Just give them a soft voice and a reason to wait, and they went back to their pepper soup and their church groups without complaint. She did not think about the call again. She did not think about the quality of the silence on the other end of the line. She did not think about the pause that had stretched just a half-second too long before the woman said, I understand completely. She did not think about any of it because she had already moved on to the next thing, the way she moved on from everything that did not directly concern her comfort. Across the distance, in a quiet sitting room in Oka, Lolo Chidinma Obi set her phone down on the center table and looked at it for a long time. She had heard everything she needed to hear. Not in the words. The words had been polite enough, careful enough. But in the spaces between them. The lightness. The ease with which the girl had redirected, rescheduled, dismissed. The way she had said I've been so busy running the house when Chidinma knew from her son's own mouth that there was hired help for everything in that house. The way she had not once asked a single question about her. Not her health, not her journey, not even something as simple as how are you. She thought about Emeka. She thought about the 3 years before this girl, the woman who had walked out with jewelry and a carefully worded excuse the moment a wealthier man appeared. She thought about the way her son had sat across from her at this same table afterward, not crying. Emeka never cried, just quiet in a way that frightened her more than tears would have. She had promised herself then. Never again. Not while she still had eyes to see and legs to move. She called her most trusted driver, Odalai, and told him she needed him in Lagos by Friday. She told him to say nothing to anyone, including his wife. Then she went to the back of her wardrobe, past the Ankara and the Osso-oak and the carefully pressed wrappers she wore to meetings and ceremonies, and she pulled out a bag she kept for traveling light. Plain clothes. Simple things. The kind a woman wore when she did not want to be noticed. She packed quietly and carefully, the way she did everything. Friday morning, she arrived in Lagos before the traffic thickened. Odalai drove her to a street 2 corners away from the estate and waited in the car. She had already seen the posting. Adiz had placed it on a domestic staffing group 3 weeks earlier, looking for a live-in housekeeper, someone experienced, someone who could start immediately. The pay listed was low. Lower than it should have been for a house that size. Chidinma had noted that too. She walked to the gate alone. The gateman looked her over, the plain blouse, the simple wrapper, the small bag on her shoulder, and asked her business. She told him she was there about the housekeeper position. He called inside. A minute later, she was let through. The compound was beautiful. She walked slowly, taking it in. The trimmed hedges, the wide driveway, the careful landscaping that someone paid good money to maintain. Emeka's taste. She recognized it in every detail. The front door opened before she reached it. Adiz stood in the doorway in a silkhouse dress, phone in hand, looking at her the way someone looks at something they are not sure they want to touch. Her eyes moved from the bag to the wrapper to the face, and somewhere in that assessment a decision was made. You're the one about the maid job? Yes, Chidinma said. I am. Adiz did not step aside to let her in. She leaned against the doorframe, still looking at her phone. How long have you been doing this kind of work? Many years. Can you cook? Not just jollof and stew. I mean proper food. Continental. I have guests sometimes. I can cook whatever is needed. Adiz looked up briefly, seemed satisfied with what she saw, or rather, seemed satisfied that what she saw posed no challenge to her, and stepped back from the door. Fine. You start Monday. 6 a.m. Don't be late. I hate lateness. The gateman will show you where the staff quarters are. She was already turning away, already moving back toward whatever she had been doing before the knock. And don't touch anything in the main bedroom corridor. That area is off limits. Chidinma stepped across the threshold and into her son's house. She said nothing. She looked at nothing longer than a glance. She kept her face soft and her eyes quiet. But she saw everything. The half-empty bottles on the bar cart that had not been wiped down. The delivery boxes stacked by the staircase, unopened. The fresh flowers in the entrance vase, expensive ones, already beginning to droop because nobody had changed the water. The shoes lined up near the sitting room entrance, 7 pairs at least, none of them hers, none of them Emika's. From somewhere deeper in the house, Adi's voice floated back without warmth. Close the door behind you. Lolo Chidinma Obi, who had hosted governors in her sitting room, who had been carried on a throne at her husband's burial, who had built a school with her own money in a community that still sang her name, reached back and closed the door quietly. And she went to work. If you've been following this story and you feel your heart beating faster right now, that is exactly how it should feel. Because this is just the beginning. Lolo Chidinma has entered the house, and Adiz has no idea what she has just let through her door. Make sure you are subscribed to African Tales by Amarachi so you do not miss what happens next. Click the like button if this story is already pulling at something inside you. And drop a comment below. Have you ever been in a place where someone looked right at you and saw nothing? Tell us your story. We are listening. Chapter 2 is coming, and what the maid sees inside that house will leave you speechless. By the end of the first week, Lolo Chidinma had learned the rhythms of the house the way water learns the shape of a container it is poured into. Quietly, completely, without resistance. She was up before 5 every morning. She had the kitchen swept and the kettle boiling before the compound outside had fully shaken off the night. She prepared breakfast with a kind of steadiness that came from decades of running a home. Not a home like this one, full of marble and imported fittings, but a home that had been built on discipline and love and the understanding that a family does not hold together by accident. She moved through Emika's kitchen with careful hands, learning which shelf held what, which burner ran hot, which drawer had been left in disorder by someone who used things without caring where they went. Adiz came downstairs at whatever hour suited her. Sometimes 9. Sometimes closer to 11. She would appear in the kitchen doorway in her robe, look at whatever Chidinma had prepared, and make a sound that was not quite gratitude and not quite complaint. Something in between, the sound a person makes when they expected more but cannot articulate why. Is this all? I can add eggs, ma. Or plantain. Just leave it. She would take her plate to the sitting room, eat while scrolling her phone, and leave the plate on the center table without a word. Chidinma would come in a few minutes later and take it to the kitchen. This happened every day. Adiz never once carried her own plate to the sink. She never once said thank you. Chidinma noted this. She noted everything. She noted the way Adiz spoke to the gateman. Short, sharp, as though his name was an inconvenience. She noted the way she left lights burning in rooms she had left, the way she ran water longer than necessary, the way she treated the entire house as something that existed to serve her without requiring anything in return. She noted the phone calls, long, loud ones that filled the sitting room in the afternoons when Adiz had nothing else to occupy her. Calls with women whose voices carried through the speaker because the volume was always too high. It was during one of those calls that Chidinma first heard Emika's name used in a way that settled cold and heavy in her chest. She was wiping down the dining table, moving slowly, staying close to the wall. Adiz was curled on the sofa across the room, phone pressed to her ear, talking to someone called Titi. He's still in London until next month, Adiz was saying. Yes. I know. It's actually better this way. I have the whole house to myself. No one breathing down my neck. A pause. Laughter. The man is sweet, I'm not saying he isn't. But you know how he is. Always calling, always wanting to know how I'm doing, always with the serious face. Boring, honestly. More laughter. But the account is not boring. The account is very interesting. I ordered from that boutique in Victoria Island yesterday. The one you showed me. 3 pieces. All on his card. He didn't even question it. He just said, "Enjoy yourself, Ada." She laughed again. The sound of it moved through the room and landed nowhere pleasant. Chidinma finished wiping the table. She picked up her cloth and walked to the kitchen without raising her head. She stood at the sink for a moment with the water running, not washing anything, just standing. She thought about the last time she had heard her son laugh. Really laugh, the deep, uncomplicated kind, and she tried to remember how long ago that had been. Before the last woman, certainly. Maybe a little before that. She turned the tap off and went back to work. The friends came on a Thursday afternoon. Two of them, TT, whose voice Chidinma recognized from the phone calls, and another woman named Blessing who wore her wealth loudly in the way some people do when they are not entirely sure it belongs to them. They arrived in a car that was not theirs, with shopping bags that had been charged to cards they did not fund, and they filled the sitting room with noise and perfume and the particular kind of laughter that women use when they are performing happiness for each other. Adiz was different with them in the room. Brighter. More animated. She called for food and drinks with the ease of someone who had been giving orders her entire life, and Chidinma moved back and forth from the kitchen bringing things. A plate of small chops, bottles of chilled juice, glasses that needed to be wiped before serving because Adiz had once spent 5 full minutes criticizing a water spot on a glass in front of a guest. She was setting the drinks on the side table when TT looked at her directly for the first time. "How long has she been with you?" she asked Adiz, nodding in Chidinma's direction as though she were a piece of furniture being assessed for a room. "A week," Adiz said without looking up from her phone. "She came through that staffing group." "She looks old." TT tilted her head. "Like she should be somebody's grandmother somewhere, not working." Adiz glanced up briefly. "She manages. The cooking is decent." She looked back at her phone. "Besides, where will she go? Women like that need people like us. If we don't give them work, who will? We are doing her a favor, honestly." Blessing laughed. TT laughed. Adiz smiled at something on her screen and said nothing further. Chidinma had been in the process of straightening the coasters on the side table. She finished straightening them. She aligned them evenly, the way she aligned everything, and then she walked back to the kitchen with the empty tray. "Women like that need people like us." She set the tray on the counter. She had built a school. She had sat on the boards of 2 charitable foundations. She had employed over 40 people across her properties in Anambra alone, people she knew by name, people whose children she had paid school fees for when the need arose. She had been addressed as Lolo by chiefs who had spent decades in traditional leadership. She had done all of this not because she needed anyone to see it, but because it was the right way to live. And she was standing in her son's kitchen being called a woman like that by a girl who had never earned a single thing in her life. She breathed in slowly. She breathed out. She went back to work. Later that evening, after the friends had gone and Adiz had retreated upstairs, Chidinma was tidying the guest bathroom when she opened the cabinet beneath the sink looking for a replacement sponge. What she found instead was a stack of envelopes, pushed to the back behind a bundle of unused towels. She pulled one out. Then another. Then another. They were all addressed to Emeka, utility notices, a bank statement, what appeared to be correspondence from a property management company. All unopened. All shoved out of sight. She stood with the envelopes in her hand and looked at them for a long moment. She thought about the way Adiz had spoken of his account. The ease of it. 3 pieces from that boutique on his card, and he didn't even question it. She thought about the bills sitting here unseen, about the house running on Emeka's money while the woman spending it hid his correspondence in a bathroom cabinet so she would not have to think about the cost of anything. She placed the envelopes back exactly as she had found them. That night, she sat on the edge of the narrow bed in the staff quarters and called Odalai. "I have seen enough," she said quietly. "But I will stay a little longer." Odalai, who had worked for her for 11 years and had learned not to ask questions she had not invited, simply said, "Yes, Ma. I am here." She ended the call and sat in the dark for a while without sleeping. The next morning, Adiz came downstairs at 10:30, looked at the breakfast that had been kept warm for her, and said it was too cold. She pushed the plate aside, ordered Chidinma to make a fresh one, and sat scrolling through her phone while she waited. When the new plate arrived, she ate half of it, declared she was no longer hungry, and left the table. That evening she called Chidinma into the bedroom and pointed at a row of shoes lined up near the wardrobe. "Hand wash those before you sleep. All of them. I need them clean for Saturday." Chidinma looked at the shoes. 7 pairs. Strappy, complicated things with clasps and fastenings that did not open easily. "Yes, Ma." She carried them to the utility room and began. The clasps were stiff. Her fingers, which had not done this kind of work in many years, struggled with the fastenings on the third pair. From upstairs, she could hear Adiz on the phone, laughing at something, the sound bright and careless as a coin dropped on tile. Chidinma worked the clasp loose slowly, set the shoe in the basin, and reached for the next one. She did not hurry. She did not complain. She simply worked, the way she had always worked, with her full attention, and with the patience of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing and exactly why. If you are watching this and you are shaking your head right now, good. Because you should be. Lolo Chidinma is on her knees in that utility room washing shoes that belong to a woman who called her invisible, and she is still not done watching. She has not seen everything yet. Stay with African Tales by Amarachi because Chapter 3 is where this story stops being uncomfortable and starts being unbearable. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. The truth is coming, and it will not arrive quietly. 3 weeks passed. Lolo Chidinma had counted them not by the calendar but by the accumulation of small humiliations, the way a person counts stones they have been made to carry, not because they are weak but because they are paying attention. The house had become a study in cruelty that did not know it was cruelty. That was the most revealing part. Adiz did not treat her badly because she was angry or because something had gone wrong that day. She treated her badly the way she breathed. Automatically, without thought, as if the right to diminish another person was simply part of the air she moved through. She had grown up believing that some people existed to serve and others existed to be served, and she had placed herself so firmly in the second category that the first had stopped looking human to her entirely. On a Tuesday morning in the 4th week, Chidinma had been sent on an errand to the market 3 streets away. The sky had been clear when she left. By the time she was walking back, a bag in each hand, careful not to bruise the tomatoes Adiz was particular about, the rain arrived without warning, the kind of Lagos downpour that comes fast and leaves no time to find cover. She pressed close to a wall, shielded the bags as best she could, and waited for the worst of it to pass. When it eased, she walked quickly, arriving at the gate 7 minutes later than she had been told to return. Adiz was in the sitting room when she came in, and she looked at the time on her phone before she looked at the wet woman standing in her entrance holding her groceries. "You're late." "I'm sorry, Ma. The rain." "I don't want to hear about rain. You left at 8:15. You should have been back by 9. It is 9:12. Chidinma said nothing. "I'm cutting today's pay. If you cannot manage a simple errand on time, there are consequences." She looked back at her phone. "Put the things in the kitchen and change out of those wet clothes. You're dripping on the floor." She docked the pay without looking up again. Chidinma carried the bags to the kitchen, set them on the counter, and stood for a moment with water still running from the edge of her wrapper to the tiles. She was not thinking about the money. She had more money sitting in accounts Adiz would never see than this girl had spent in a year. She was thinking about the other women. The ones who had stood in this same position, cold, wet, docked, and had no other options. The ones who swallowed it because they had to. The ones whose dignity was treated as a debt they owed simply for needing work. She changed her clothes. She came back. She continued working. 2 days later, the pay was docked again. Adiz had been on a phone call in the sitting room, a long one, the kind that required absolute quiet in the surrounding rooms. Chidinma had been in the corridor nearby, moving from one room to the next as quietly as she could manage. At some point, she exhaled, not loudly, not sharply, just the natural breath of a body that had been moving carefully for too long. Adiz covered the phone with her hand and turned to look at her. Can you breathe somewhere else? I can hear you. Chidinma moved further down the corridor. That evening, Adiz told her the second docked amount would be subtracted at the end of the month. She listed it in her phone under a note she called staff deductions with the same administrative calm she used to log shopping deliveries. The pepper soup incident came on a Friday. Chidinma had prepared it with a kind of care that comes from decades of knowing how food should taste. The right balance of uziza and utazi, the heat built slowly so the broth carried depth, the fish added at precisely the right time so it held its shape. It was, by any honest measure, a very good pot of pepper soup. She knew it was good. She had tasted it before serving, as she always did. Adiz had 2 friends over for lunch. They sat at the dining table and Chidinma served them. The friends ate without complaint. One of them actually said quietly after the first spoon, the involuntary sound of something tasting better than expected. Then the other one, Blessing, the loud one, looked at the bowl and said, "It's nice but it looks very local. Like canteen food." The table went quiet for half a second. Then Adiz put her spoon down. "Mama Ngozi." Chidinma appeared from the kitchen doorway. "This pepper soup." Adiz gestured at the pot on the table. "It's not what I wanted. Take it back and start again. And this time make it look presentable. I have guests." She brought it out. Adiz looked at it. Looked at her friends. "Better," she said and picked up her spoon. Blessing did not comment this time. The old soup fed the gateman that evening. He ate it gratefully and told her it was the best pepper soup he had tasted in years. Chidinma thanked him and went inside. The morning of the blouse was perhaps the one that pressed deepest. A woman had come to visit. A neighbor from the other side of the estate, thin and well-dressed, the kind who noticed things and remembered them. Adiz had dressed carefully and was looking composed when the woman arrived. They sat in the sitting room together with tea that Chidinma had prepared, and everything was pleasant enough until Adiz glanced at the blouse she was wearing, a cream silk one, which Chidinma had pressed to smoothness that morning, and decided that one side of the collar was not lying flat. She called Chidinma out of the kitchen. "This blouse." She pulled at the collar slightly. "I told you about ironing. Look at this side. It is not sitting right." The neighbor glanced over, then looked diplomatically away. "Take it off and do it again." Adiz was already reaching for the buttons. Chidinma stood in the middle of the sitting room while Adiz removed the blouse and held it out toward her, not handing it to her, just holding it out at arm's length as though it was something distasteful. When Chidinma reached for it, Adiz let it go before her hand closed around it, and the blouse dropped to the floor between them. Adiz turned back to her guest and resumed speaking. Chidinma bent down and picked the blouse up from the floor. Her knees pressed against the cold marble. These same knees that had walked red carpets at her husband's funeral ceremony, that had carried her across the floor of a school she had built from the ground up to shake the hands of children who had no other place to learn. These knees, on this floor, picking up a blouse that had been dropped deliberately in front of a witness who was now staring into her teacup. She stood. She took the blouse to the kitchen. She pressed it again, perfectly, as it had already been. She brought it back and laid it over the back of the sofa without a word. Adiz did not acknowledge it. That afternoon, when the house was quiet, Chidinma sat in the staff quarters with her thoughts arranged around her like objects she was sorting. She thought about what she had told Odalai. "I have seen enough." She had said that in the 2nd week. She was now in the 4th. She had stayed because she kept thinking she had reached the bottom of what this woman was, and then discovering there was more beneath it. She thought about Emeka's last girlfriend. That one had been clever about her cruelty. She had performed sweetness for everyone, drained the accounts quietly, smiled while she planned her exit. This one did not bother with performance at home. This one was exactly what she was, without decoration, because she had never once considered that the people watching her had any power to do anything about it. That one took his money quietly, she thought. This one takes it loudly and takes his dignity too. She was still sitting with that thought when her phone buzzed. A video call. Emeka. She stood quickly, moved to the corner of the room away from the small window, and declined it. Then she steadied herself and sat back down. Upstairs, she heard Adiz answer her own phone. The same call, rerouted. "Baby." The voice that floated down was warm, bright, unrecognizable as belonging to the same woman who had let a blouse fall to the floor an hour earlier. "I was just thinking about you. I miss you so much." A pause. Emeka's voice, too low to make out the words. "I've just been managing everything here. It's a lot, you know, running the house alone. But I'm okay. I'm always okay as long as I know you're coming home soon." Another pause. Chidinma sat very still. "She's fine," Adiz was saying now lighter, almost laughing. "The new housekeeper? Yes, she's working out. She's old but she's okay." A small laugh. "Don't worry about the house, baby. Everything is fine here. Focus on your meetings." She heard Adiz move toward the window. There was the sound of the phone shifting, the camera turning. Chidinma pressed herself further into the corner instinctively, though the window above her looked the other direction. "See," Adiz was saying. "House is clean. Everything is in order. Your Ada is taking care of everything." The call went on for a few more minutes and then ended. The warmth drained from Adiz's voice the moment it did, as cleanly and completely as water leaving a cup that has been tilted. Chidinma heard her walk to the other end of the corridor. Then her voice again, lower this time, on another call. "Titi." "Yes, he just called. I'm fine. Listen, I just need to survive this mother visit whenever it happens. And then after the wedding I'm in control of everything. The property alone is worth." Yes. Exactly. Everything." A laugh. "These men are so easy when you know what they want to hear." The call ended. The house was quiet. Lolo Chidinma sat in the staff quarters with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes very still, and she made the last decision she needed to make. She had come here with a question. The question had been answered. She would not leave before Emeka arrived. She needed him to see it, not to be told, not to read it in a message, but to see it with his own eyes in his own house. She would wait. This is the chapter that changes the air in the room. If you are watching this and you feel something tightening in your chest, that is the truth settling in. Lolo Chidinma has made her decision. She is not leaving. And Emeka is on his way home. Subscribe to African Tales by Amarachi right now if you are not already, because chapter 4 is the one you have been waiting for. The moment is coming. And when it arrives, nothing in that house will ever be the same again. Like this video, share it, and meet us in chapter 4. The message came in at 2:30 in the afternoon. Just landed. In the car now. Home in an hour. Can't wait to see you. Adiz read it twice, and something shifted in her face. Not softness exactly, but the performance of softness, the same way an actor finds their mark before the lights come on. She set the phone down, stood up from the sofa, and looked around the sitting room with the calculating eyes of a director who has just been told the audience is arriving. Mama Ngozi. Chidinma appeared from the kitchen doorway. Emeka is on his way from the airport. Adiz was already moving toward the staircase, her mind running ahead of her feet. I need the sitting room perfect. The throw pillows, arrange them properly, not the way you did them last time. The center table should have the flowers. Move the books off it. And I need a full spread of food ready by the time he walks in. The jollof rice from this morning is fine, just make sure it is still hot, and fry more plantain. I want cold water and a fruit bowl ready on the side table in the sitting room the moment he steps through that door. The moment. Not 5 minutes after. The moment. Yes, Ma. And the floors. Check the floors. I don't want a single smear anywhere. He notices things. She paused on the third step and turned back. And change out of that wrapper. Wear the uniform. I want this house to look correct. She disappeared upstairs. Chidinma stood in the sitting room for a moment after she was gone. She had known this day was coming. She had been waiting for it with the particular patience of someone who has already decided what they will do when a thing finally arrives. Not excitement, not dread, but the quiet readiness of a person who has prepared. She moved to the kitchen and began organizing the food, reheating what needed reheating, frying the plantain with steady hands, arranging the fruit in the bowl the way she would have done in her own home, carefully, as if it mattered. Because it did matter. Everything she had ever done had mattered. That was the difference between her and the woman upstairs. She could hear Adiz above her, the sound of the wardrobe opening and closing, the tap running, the movement of someone preparing themselves for a performance. The sounds came in quick, agitated bursts. Adiz was not calm. Beneath the practiced confidence there was something that ran fast and nervous, and it showed in moments like this, the flush of activity, the sharp orders, the inability to be still. Chidinma arranged the fruit bowl. She straightened the flowers on the center table. She folded the throw at the end of the sofa with the same care she gave to everything, smoothed it once with the flat of her hand, and stood back to look at the room. It looked beautiful. Emika's house always looked beautiful when someone was actually taking care of it. Adiz came downstairs 40 minutes later looking composed, a soft wrap dress, her hair done, jewelry simple but deliberate. She walked through the sitting room with critical eyes, adjusted one pillow that did not need adjusting, and then stood near the entrance and looked at her phone. The minutes moved slowly. At 3:20, the sound of a car came through the gate. Adiz straightened. She smoothed the front of her dress once with both hands, drew a breath, arranged her face into something open and warm and waiting. She moved to the entrance. In the kitchen, Chidinma turned off the burner under the rice and lifted the tray, the glass of cold water and the fruit bowl, as instructed. She carried it to the counter near the kitchen doorway and waited. The front door opened. Emeka Obi stepped into his house for the first time in 11 weeks, and the first thing he did was exhale. That long, settling exhale of a man who has been away from the place where he rests and has finally returned to it. He was taller than Chidinma remembered from the photographs. Or perhaps it was simply that she had not seen him in months, had only heard his voice on the phone calls she was never supposed to know about. He looked tired in the careful way men carry tiredness when they do not want to show it, and he looked genuinely glad to be home. Adiz went to him and they embraced. She held on for a moment longer than necessary, and over his shoulder her eyes moved around the room with quick satisfaction. The flowers, the arrangement, the clean floors, everything in its place. She had staged this perfectly. "I missed you," she said into his shoulder. "I missed you too," he said, and she could hear that he meant it, which was the most useful thing about Emeka. He always meant what he said. They separated and he looked around the room. "The house looks good. I've been working hard," she said. Then, raising her voice toward the kitchen without looking away from him, "Mom and Gozi, the water, now." There was a brief pause. In the kitchen, Chidinma picked up the tray. She moved toward the doorway carefully. The glass was full and she did not want to spill. Not now, not today of all days. She was perhaps 4 seconds slower than Adiz had wanted. 4 seconds. Adiz felt those 4 seconds like a splinter. She could feel them in her jaw, in the tightening of her smile, in the sudden hot awareness of Emeka standing beside her watching. She had built this scene carefully, the beautiful room, the warm welcome, the devoted fiancé who ran a smooth house, and a slow maid was a crack in the picture she needed to be perfect. She turned from Emeka. She walked 3 steps toward the kitchen doorway just as Chidinma emerged from it, tray held steady in both hands, eyes down. And in front of her son, in front of the man she loved and the life she had been building toward and the future she believed was already secured, Adiz raised her right hand and brought it hard across the older woman's face. The sound was sharp and flat and wrong in the way that sounds are when they come from violence that was not expected. The tray did not fall. Chidinma's hands had been holding it too long, too steadily, for the shock of the blow to take it from her. She absorbed the impact without a step backward, without a cry, without letting the glass tip even slightly. She simply stopped. The way a mountain stops when something strikes it, not because it could not move, but because it does not need to. Emeka did not speak. He did not move. He was looking at the woman who had been hit, and something in his mind was working very fast, the way a mind works when it is trying to reconcile 2 things that cannot both be true at the same time. The shape of her. The set of her shoulders. The way she was holding the tray, even now, even after, with a dignity that did not fit the uniform she was wearing. Something about her was pulling at something inside him, a thread he could not name. Then she raised her head. She looked at him. Not at Adiz. Not at the room. Directly at him, the way only one person in the world had ever looked at him, with that particular combination of knowing and love and sorrow that had no equivalent anywhere in his life. The world stopped. Mama. The word came out of him as barely sound. As breath that had tried to be a word and almost not made it. Adiz turned at the sound of it. She looked at him. She looked at the woman. She looked at him again. And somewhere in the processing of those two things, the name he had just said and the face he had said it to, her expression did something it had never done before in her carefully managed life. It fell apart. The tray was still in Lolo Chidinma's hands. The water in the glass had not spilled. The fruit sat in its bowl exactly as arranged. And Emeka stood in the entrance of his own house with his bag at his feet and his mouth open and his eyes full of something that had not finished forming yet, something that was not yet anger, not yet grief, something that was still in the process of becoming whatever it would be. The sitting room that Adiz had arranged so carefully, the flowers and the pillows and the swept floors, all of it was still there, exactly as she had designed it. But the picture had already broken, and no amount of staging would put it back together again. Do not go anywhere. Do not close this video. Because what happens next is what this entire story has been building toward. The moment the truth speaks for itself in a room where there is nowhere left to hide. Chapter 5 is the final chapter, and it will not let you breathe easy until it is finished. Stay with African Tales by Amarachi. Subscribe if you have not. Share this with someone right now. And meet us in the last chapter, because Lolo Chidinma is about to speak, and every word she says will land like a verdict. Nobody moved. The sitting room held the three of them in a silence so complete it was almost a sound of its own. The silence of a thing that has been building for weeks finally arriving at its full weight, dropping into a room that was not ready for it even though everything had been leading here. Emeka was the first to move. He crossed the room in 4 steps and took the tray from his mother's hands. He set it on the center table without looking at it. Then he turned back to her and raised both hands to her face. Not dramatically, not with a performance of emotion, but the way a person touches something they are afraid has been broken, carefully, checking. His thumbs brushed her cheek where the mark of the slap still sat warm and red against her skin. His jaw tightened. He did not look at Adiz. Not yet. He kept his eyes on his mother's face and he said very quietly, "Mama, what are you doing here? Why are you dressed like this?" It was not entirely a question. It was the sound of a man whose mind was already assembling the answer and needed only confirmation. Lolo Chidinma looked at her son. She had not cried in the 6 weeks she had spent in this house. She had not cried when she washed the shoes or picked the blouse from the floor or stood in the rain with market bags or sat alone in the staff quarters listening to the woman above her laugh at how easy men were. She had not allowed herself the relief of it because she had come here with a purpose and tears were not part of the purpose. She did not cry now either. She reached up and covered one of his hands with hers. Then she said, "Sit down, my son. There are things you need to hear." "Mama." "Sit down." He sat. Adiz had not moved from the spot where she had been standing when the slap landed. She was still there, 3 feet from the kitchen doorway, and she looked like a woman who had stepped off a familiar path in the dark and could not locate the ground beneath her feet. Her hands were at her sides. Her face had lost the arrangement she had spent 40 minutes constructing upstairs. Lolo Chidinma did not raise her voice. She spoke the way she had always spoken when something important needed to be said. Clearly, without decoration, with the steady pacing of a woman who knew that truth did not require volume to land. She told him about the phone call. The one Adiz had thought was a brief, manageable exchange with a woman she would never have to take seriously. She told him what she had heard in it. The lightness, the dismissal, the instruction to wait until the man came home as though his mother were an appointment to be rescheduled. She told him that she had listened to that call and heard, beneath the polished surface of the words, something that frightened her. Not rudeness. Something worse than rudeness. Indifference. The kind that is so complete it does not know it exists. She told him about the disguise. The borrowed clothes, the simple name, the job posting she had found and applied to as a woman looking for work. She told him about the interview. How Adiz had sat with her phone in her hand and her eyes everywhere except on the face of the woman she was hiring, and how that alone had told her something significant. Then she told him about the 6 weeks. She told him calmly, in order, the way a person reads from a document they have been keeping. The docked pay. The rain errand. The pepper soup remade for no reason. The blouse dropped to the floor and the knee that pressed against cold marble to retrieve it. The phone call she was not supposed to hear, the voice that changed the moment he came on the line, the words that came after the call ended. I just need to survive the mother visit. These men are so easy when you know what they want to hear. She told him everything. She did not exaggerate. She did not add weight to things that already had enough weight on their own. She simply laid it out, piece by piece, in the sitting room that Adiz had decorated so carefully for his return, and let the accumulation of it do what accumulation does. Emeka sat through all of it without speaking. His hands were resting on his knees. His face was very still in the way that faces are when the person behind them is working very hard to hold something together. When she finished, the room was quiet again. Then Adiz moved. She stepped forward, and her voice when it came was not the cold, commanding voice of the sitting room or the warm, performed voice of the phone calls. It was something Chidinma had not heard from her before, unguarded, frantic, the voice of someone who has just watched the ground disappear. Emeka. Baby. I didn't know who she was. You have to understand that. If I had known, if anyone had told me, I would never have. I know, Emeka said. His voice was quiet. Controlled in the specific way that control is hardest to maintain. That is exactly the problem. Adiz stopped. You didn't know who she was, he said. She was just a woman to you. An old woman who came to work in the house. And this is who you are to people like that. He did not raise his voice. He did not gesture. I am not angry that you didn't know who she was. I am looking at who you were to someone you thought had no power over you. And I am seeing something I cannot explain away. I was stressed. You were home, he said. Alone. With everything you needed. With money that was not yours, that you spent without once checking what it was for. With a woman in your house doing everything for you. And you were cruel to her. Not once. Every day. For 6 weeks. He paused. There is no version of stressed that explains 6 weeks. Adiz's eyes filled. The tears came, and they were real. Not performed, not strategic. The actual tears of someone confronting a consequence they did not see coming because they had never once imagined they would face one. She had spent her life moving through spaces where the people below her had no recourse and the people above her never looked closely enough. She had never been in a room where both of those things failed at the same time. I'm sorry, she said. Emeka, I'm so sorry. I'll change. I will. He did not answer her. He looked at his mother. Lolo Chidinma met his eyes. She shook her head once, slowly. Then she turned to Adiz, and she spoke for the last time in that room, woman to woman, with none of the performance of the 6 weeks behind her and nothing left to observe. I came here to test your heart, she said. I did not come to destroy you. I came because my son has been broken before by someone who smiled at him and meant nothing by it, and I could not let that happen again without knowing the truth. She looked at her steadily. But I did not expect this. I thought perhaps you were cold or you were careless or you were not ready. I did not think someone could treat another human being the way you treated me every day in this house and feel nothing. Not guilt, not pause, nothing. She let that settle. You did not disrespect a maid. You showed me who you are when you believe there is no cost to it. And I cannot unsee that. I will not pretend to. Adiz had nothing left to say. The tears ran and she let them, because there was nothing else to do with them. Emeka stood. He walked to the window and looked out at the compound for a moment, the trimmed hedges, the wide driveway, the careful grounds, and then he turned back. He spoke to Adiz without cruelty and without hesitation. I think you should start gathering your things. I'll have Odalai take you wherever you need to go. Emeka. I'm not angry with you, he said. And there was something in the way he said it that was worse than anger. A flatness, a finality, the sound of a door that has already been decided. I just know now. And I can't unknow it. He crossed to his mother, offered her his arm. Come. Let me show you the veranda. I want to sit outside for a while. She took his arm. They walked together to the back of the house, where the evening was coming in soft and slow over the tops of the trees, and the city beyond the walls had begun to settle into its quieter hours. Behind them, the sitting room held the flowers and the arranged pillows and the fruit bowl on the center table. Everything exactly as Adiz had placed it, everything in order, the perfect scene she had built for his return. She stood in the middle of it and looked at her hands. She had spent 6 weeks giving orders in a house that was not hers, spending money she had not earned, performing a life she had never built. She had moved through it all with such certainty, such complete, unquestioned certainty, that the people below her did not count and the man above her would not look closely enough to see what she really was. She had been wrong on both counts. She went upstairs. She opened the wardrobe and began to take things down. The dresses, the shoes, the bags, the careful collection of things she had acquired with a card that would no longer work by morning. She packed them the same way she had arrived. Quickly, efficiently, with the practiced ease of someone who had always known, somewhere beneath everything, that this was not permanent. That she had been a guest in a life she had not earned, and guests, eventually, are asked to leave. On the veranda, Emeka and his mother sat close together in the cooling evening. Her head rested on his shoulder. He had not asked her the full weight of questions yet. How her knees had held up, whether she had eaten well, whether any of it had cost her more than she was saying. Those conversations would come. There would be time. For now they simply sat. The city hummed softly beyond the walls. A bird moved through the trees at the far end of the compound. The light was the particular amber of a Lagos evening when the day has finally agreed to release its heat. Lolo Chidinma looked out at the garden her son had built. She had come here to test a woman's heart. She had not expected to find it empty. But she had found her son. And that, in the end, was the thing that had always mattered most. This is the end of the story, but let it stay with you for a moment before you move on. Because Lolo Chidinma did not come to Lagos to punish anyone. She came because she loved her son enough to kneel on cold marble and wash shoes that were not hers and swallow 6 weeks of cruelty just to know the truth. That is what a mother's love looks like when it is real. And now you have seen what it costs, and what it saves. If this story moved something in you, let us know in the comments. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you are new here, welcome. Subscribe to African Tales by Amarachi and stay close, because we have more stories coming that will sit with you long after the video ends. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next one.